Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ultimate Growth Experience podcast. So today, I would like to do a very quick book review. So, here's a book by Professor Victor Davis Hanson from the Hoover Institution in Stanford. He's also a professor emeritus at California State University, as I recall. So the case for Trump, in my view, is an exceptional piece. And I don't say this as a Republican. I'm not a Republican. I'm a centrist. I am a John Stuart Mill, Jonathan Haidt centrist. I look at libertarian, progressive, centrist, left-wing, center-right, center-left perspectives, and I read across the political spectrum. And the reason that I wanted to address this book is because I'm going to provide you, the voter, with my prediction for 2020. In my opinion, Trump will win 2020. And why is that? Well, there are a few things that Professor Hanson mentions. He mentions both good and bad sides of Trump. But the one thing that he made very, very clear was the fact that Trump was the only candidate from 2020 who was willing to deal with the negative consequences and externalities caused by globalization. And I'm talking about not only free flow of labor, but also unintended consequences caused by free trade agreements, free flow of capital out of the United States, the well-intended free market mechanisms of the 1980s that have led to a lot of particularly low-income white working class people from not only losing their jobs, losing their dignity, losing their sense of self-respect, and also the fact that at the moment, due to globalization, a lot of liberal establishment people have put themselves in a bubble. And that has led to people essentially revolting against the system. And we've seen this before during the late 19th century when the Industrial Revolution led to labor exploitation by big industrial powers. We see this through the Ford organization, the automobile industry, child labor exploitation, and other stuff, which is what led to the rise of the New Deal movement in the United States and also in New Zealand. That's when Michael Joseph Savage came in and he created the Social Security Act and the idea of cradle to the grave idea of a social safety net. So that system has been getting degraded, obviously. But it's parallel to the 19th century, the Gilded Age. And Trump is essentially a symptom. I watched a debate by Andrew Yang, and he made the case that globalization, automation, the rise of artificial intelligence, the fact that global value change, these new market-based mechanisms have prevented particularly developed country working class folks from having a sense of meaning. Victor Davis Hanson referred to a number of books, for example, Losing Ground by Charles Murray, and also Robert Putnam's book about education. The fact that working class folks have been getting screwed over by the system, and quite frankly, another factor is the fact that retraining of these working class folks have failed. The Brookings Institution provided a number of different reports talking about the fact that it ranged from 0% to 15% of retraining rate. And that means that a lot of these working class folks who worked in these manufacturing industries have been getting left out. And another point that Dr. Hanson mentioned, which I think is quite right, is that the Democratic Party has been moving far left in terms of cultural issues. I meant in the sense that, for example, nuclear family, having a religion, the idea of personal responsibility, the idea of having a dignified life, and also the Democrats' obsession about race issues, about gender issues, about transgender rights, and not really looking at the perspectives of the white working class, and also, in fact, more or less the lower middle income white working class folks. And in some sense, a lot of the hard-working minority community, such as the Asian Americans. So the Democrats have been moving away and focusing more on identity politics, whereas Trump came in and said, I will quote unquote, I will build a great wall which to deal with the illegal immigration. And in fact, Dr. Hanson does mention the fact that after the Democrats have been very laxed about the border enforcement across California and New Mexico, that was when a lot of the original Native Americans have felt very very disrespected, but also rejected from the establishment politicians. And so there are a number of things that he mentions. For example, Trump's brutal, vulgar personality, the fact that he's able to and willing to say anything without even thinking, the fact that he wears the same tie, the same suit everywhere he goes to, the fact that he has the same Queen's accent to every manufacturing worker or a voter in New York or California. He didn't really care, and so I think the American people voted for the gentleman partially because moderate Republicans thought, well, he's gonna push a more mainstream Republican agenda anyway, which has indeed proven to be correct. He passed the tax cuts. He passed a number of other initiatives which are basically borderline on the mainstream Republican, except he continues tweeting. It's something that Dr. Hanson has continuously mentioned, the fact that is going to be problematic for him entering 2020. But as an individual who's been observing this phenomena of populism around the world, I think about 2 or 3 years ago I said that left-wing populism was the alternative. I don't think that's a solution either. I think it's a combination of both understanding the causes of populism and second, figuring out a good platform around public policy to deal with these externalities caused by globalization. And that's something that I think the Democrats need to deal with. One of my heroes, Dr. Francis Fukuyama, made it very clear that the Democrats need to return to socio-economic based platforms rather than running on the idea of race politics, gender politics, because what happened was, because the Democrats continued the movement of the 1960s, the Republicans created their own form of white identity politics, and that's been represented and manifested around Trump. But I understand why people are going to vote for him, and quite frankly, at the moment, when you look at the state in which Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren have been running their campaigns, it seems quite evident to me that the Democrats have not learned their lesson. I don't think they're moving back towards the cultural center, like reasonable center, where the idea of being frugal, being personally responsible, looking after your community, these common core principles, and even the idea of borders or curbing and dealing with illegal immigration has been put off the table when all of the Democratic candidates have said, we're going to provide healthcare to all illegal immigrants. And quite frankly, in my perspective, to the mainstream American voter, they'll be looking at it and being appalled. They're appalled by Trump's erratic and unstable behavior in terms of the way that he tweets, in terms of the way that he demonizes the mainstream media. But in that regard as well, I think in some respect, well, Victor Davis Hanson makes it clear that the mainstream media, according to a YouGov poll by Yale University, about 92% of the media have been against Trump. So it's evidently clear as to why he's so appalled by it. Obama had a 40% anti-Obama coverage in the media. So it's evident. Well, you can see both sides, right? But the main point is that the Democrats have to come up with a broader and open-ended way of looking and dealing with globalization, stop pandering to identity politics, and stick to the issues. And unfortunately, because of the squad in the Democratic Party, led by people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and the other lady, I think her name is Ariana Presley, those four have not helped the Democratic cause. And when you look at it in the long run, if Trump keeps the economy going, if he doesn't do anything reckless or stupid, then I think he'll have a relatively comfortable election victory in 2020. As a Tulsi Gabbard supporter, as a person who's very moderate and center-grounded, more on the lines of Steve Pinker and John Haidt, I hope to see the Democrats sort their and get their act together, but I don't think that's going to happen, because when you have people like Jordan Peterson saying personal responsibility, they react with saying, hey, he's a bigot. And that's when you know that the mainstream Democratic Party have moved very far left. And people need to think about these things. And that was my review of this book. So this book is excellent. I think everybody should to check it out. It's obviously a very pro-Republican way of looking at American politics, but I found it quite a interesting and compelling read. So, ladies and gentlemen, please check the book out. Have a read with an open mind, even if you're on the left. I think you'll learn something. Thank you, and I hope you have a good evening.